So the first thing that we need to do is remind ourselves how to square binomials, and this is the process that we're going to use to do what's called completing the square. So I'm probably only going to go over one of these, because you guys remember what it means to square something. You multiply it by itself. You cannot distribute a square into a binomial. You can only do that when it's all multiplication or division. So I'm going to erase that because it gives me the creeps to see something so mathematically incorrect. All right, so what we do instead is distribute with our binomials. X times x is x squared, x times -3, -3 times x, and -3 times -3. So when we combine our like terms, we get -6x plus 9. Now the pattern that we need to notice is that our middle term, our b term, is 2 times 3, which is the number that was sitting in our binomial. And 9 is 3 squared, again, the number sitting in our binomial. And the negative sign that was in our binomial is the same sign that we have in front of our b term. So the shortcut on b, if you can follow me, is x squared plus 2 times 6x plus 6 squared. So we'd get x squared plus 12x plus 36. And then this is positive because the sign in the binomial is positive. So again, the pattern that we need to notice is our b term is 2 times the number in the binomial, and our c term is the number in the binomial squared. So keep that in mind as we learn how to complete the square. So, step 1, cut b in half. b, remember, is the value that's being multiplied by your x. So we've got half of 6 is 3. Square it. And then add that value to the binomial. So here's what happens. And this is very similar to what we just saw on the first page, is we've got x squared plus 6x plus 9. How would we factor that? This is a T-chart method. What multiplies to 9 and adds to 6? 3 and 3. So we'd have x plus 3 times x plus 3, or x plus 3 squared. So we completed the square by creating a trinomial that can be factored as a perfect square. This next one, I lost the square on my x. That's what I intended. X squared minus 4x. So again, same process. Cut your b value in half. Now the negative sign doesn't matter until you factor it. So when I cut the 4 in half, I don't have to worry that it's negative, because the next thing I do is square it. So whether it's positive or negative, I'm still going to get a positive 4. So I'm going to add that to my binomial. And then when I think about factoring it, what multiplies to 4 and adds to -4? It's this value that I got right here when I cut the b in half. It's 2. And in this case, it's -2 because this term is negative. So the -2 times -2 gives us the positive 4. And the -2 plus -2 gives us that -4, that's our b term. All right, hopefully that process made sense, because we're going to use it to solve the equations. We're going to solve by completing the square. When we've got an equation, the first thing we need to do is isolate the 2 terms with a variable. So I'm going to add the 7 to both sides. And then I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to cut the 2 in half, square it, and add it. This time I have to add it to both sides in order to balance the equation. Because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Now I'm going to factor the left-hand side, which you don't have to think when you factor. What we did was we completed the square. This half the b term equals how you factor it. We got 1, that's how we factor it. We're turning it into a perfect square. And then we solve by undoing. Taking the square root of both sides, remember when you take the square root, you get a positive and a negative value. 8 can be simplified, the square root of 8 can be simplified. Square root of 4 is 2, and there's a 2 left over because 8 is 4 times 2. And then subtracting 1 from both sides. One more. If that process didn't make sense to you, hopefully seeing it one more time will. I know that completing the square is challenging material, so just bring your questions to class with you. All right, step 1, cut your b value in half. If you want to kind of make a note of what that is, you can have that off to the side. And then you square that and add it to both sides. Sorry, isolate your x values first, but in this case they were already isolated. Then factor it. The reason that we added the 16 was so we could factor it as a perfect square. X minus 4 times x minus 4. Solve, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. 19 does not have any perfect square factors, so we add 4 to both sides. All right, here's your you try. Attempt it as best you can. If this is making 0 sense, like I said, bring your questions to class and we'll get it taken care of.